What's up, YouTube? Mr. here, and today I want to talk a little bit about Sunder charms, characters, what feels OP right now, basically my thoughts on the cold source, because that's the character that I took to 99, how I think it affects the game, etc. So, the first thing that I want to kind of discuss is the Sunder charms themselves, right? There is cold, fire, light, and poison that run minus 70 to minus 90 for your personal res, and will break those immunities. Then there is a magic immunity breaking one and a physical immunity breaking one. I believe the physical runs 10 to 20%, and the magic immunity drops your magic immunity by like 40 to 60, maybe, something like that. I actually don't remember what percentage it drops it by. But let's discuss each of those right there. So I do think that the charms, I think coming in, I was a little wary of the charms because I wasn't sure if it would affect the uniqueness of monsters in Diablo 2 by too much. What I mean by that is currently in Diablo 2, or previously, as I should say, in Diablo 2, with no Sunder charms and immunities, I felt that immunities were actually a solid thing, and I still like immunities in some capacity within the game. I like them in the leveling up piece. I like them in the when you're playing through the game piece, all of this. I think they add a really big challenge to the game. They make you have to really think about, how do I get past this area? It's full of light immunes and they're fast and they're coming at me, whatever, and I don't know how to get around them, you know? And it makes it so that the game isn't so one-dimensional and just straight killing and blasting stuff and whatever, right? I do think there's actually some fun in that challenge. Some people disagree. They say immunities suck. They want to be able to just kill everything. And for that, there are other games. But I do think in Diablo 2, that actually is a really core piece of it. And something that's existed for a while is that difficulty does exist. And you're either skipping it, or you're finding another skill to use, or you're getting a mercenary and slow pushing it, or some sort of, Valkyrie or whatever. So it's really nice. But like I said, once we got to the higher levels and we got our Sunder charm, because it can't be used till level 75, it created the question for me of, now that I have this character that can kill every monster, will it now be a problem in that the uniqueness of monsters go down? By that I mean, okay, I can kill cold immunes, so now I'm not scared of abominables, I'm not scared of frozen terrors or whatever it is. Not that I would be crazy scared of them before, but I would be scared in the way of, like, I can't kill them, so I have to avoid them, or these areas are a little scarier because if I'm trying to TP through it and they're there and I drop a blizzard or something, it doesn't affect them. And so it added a little bit of, that difference to them. But I'm happy to say I don't think Sunder Charms actually ruined this piece for me. And the reason is because monsters in Diablo 2 still feel like they have enough uniqueness, even without immunity, which is something that I wasn't fully expecting to happen. But essentially, a Death Lord versus a, Oblivion Knight versus a soul versus a doll versus a snake versus a beetle versus a maggot. All of those, whether they are immune or not, are very unique in how they interact with your character still. Some are releasing charged bolts. Some are charging you. Some are big and tanky. Some are small and fragile, but, quick, like the raptors, right? They're very small, but they'll all, like, fly at you really fast and then do a ton of damage. Some are range and just deadly, like quill rats or archers that can be just brutal. And so even if you take away all of the all of the immunity that is on them, you're still going into a zone and saying, ooh, there's souls here and harpies here and some dolls. I'm getting out, right? Or, oh, there's moonlords. I'm still staying back and trying to pick them away from far away. I'm not just diving in and just killing everything and it turning into a little bit of what I felt happened with Path of Exile a lot when I got, was playing through and getting to later game, where I didn't care what any of the monsters were. I just cared if something had reflect or something, and that was it. But the actual individual monster, white trash monster that I was fighting didn't matter to me once I got to that later stage. So I think they do the game design from that point is really solid, and it doesn't affect it in a super negative way. The only downside I really felt was on the cold character, being cold source right there. I felt it was a little strong because I could now freeze everything or chill everything. And to me, that was maybe potentially getting a little bit stronger than it needed to be, right? I get all of that good CC, crowd control there, right? And I also get the solid damage. So I do feel like the cold source in that regard actually gets a little bit stronger than, for instance, like a fire sorceress or whatever, because as the cold source, right, I can freeze it all, but the fire source, she can hit it all for damage, but she's not able to freeze it or able to do any, status effect that's going to change them in that way. So, yeah, I felt like overall the Sunder Charms were positive in that way. But the cold character, I do think gets a little bit more value out of it because now they get that status effect of freezing or chilling on all monsters there. Which is really nice. Moving on, talking about the different characters and how it affects them. The magic one is pretty much useless. Probably needs to be reworked completely in some capacity. It probably just needs a minus to enemy magic immunity as well, or magic resist as well. Because the way a Sunder Charm works is it takes resistance and then it sets it to 95. So cold monsters originally would have like 220 or 230, 240 cold resist, which is why it couldn't be broken even with infinity, lower res, all of that stuff, because it was just so high. So now that gets put to 95. And when I say 240, it's because you're minus 100 in hell. So just think of it as they had 140 actually, right? So they would have like 140, whatever, and 100 plus is immunity, let's say. And so they would just take it and set it to 95. And this is true for all of them. They all get taken and set to 95, whether it's magic immune or cold immune or anything like that. But the thing is, once you bring something to 95 resistance, it still doesn't take a lot of damage. You need additional ways to bring that down. So something, for instance, like cold mastery, which can be up to you can go all the way over minus 200%, right? So if you have a cold Sunder Charm and minus 195% cold mastery, you've maxed it out. The monster is now at negative 100. That's the max that it can go. And you can obliterate the monster. So this is the OP piece of the cold source, is that with her her cold mastery being affecting in that way, instead of adding to damage, she can destroy the resistances of even the cold monsters. And that can be super nice. That being said, it still is, like the other characters, if you can lower it down some, the damage of like fire and light sorceresses can be insanely high and can probably kill at the same speed. I haven't really tested it, but I do need to go test. And maybe even faster, right? Being able to have a lightning zon fully spec'd out, or lightning source fully spec'd out, she still may be able to clear faster. I would need to see it. But the cold source being in a budget state, 100% is going to be the strongest one, because you don't really need a lot to drop their cold res a ton. You just need the Sunder Charm and cold mastery, which means you can just run around with some spirits and some basic stuff and still do some pretty good damage overall. Now, of course, Blizzard is a little weaker than those other skills, but you are getting the nice help from cold mastery with all of that. But for other characters, fire, light, you have things like Crescent Moon, you have Facets, you have Phoenix, you have all of these different items that are going to have minus enemy fire res, minus enemy light res. You also have Infinity, which isn't going to work at full effectiveness now, but can drop still the 17% or whatever, which is helpful. So even if you get a monster down, right, it's at 95, you have Infinity, you have some Facets, you have one piece of gear, whatever, you get down to 30%, 40% res, you're going to be able to blow it up pretty fast if you're running around with 30k lightning damage or something like that. It's not going to take a lot, and you'll be able to destroy some lightning immunes right there, as well as destroying all the other things. So I don't think it's going to be too bad in that regard for these other characters. I think they'll be fine for those elements. Poison, I do think, runs into a little bit of a difficulty, because while you do have Death's Web on a Necromancer, which has big minus on it, right? Minus 40 to 50%. That's really kind of all you're really getting. Other than that, it's like, what are you going to use on like a Plague Javazon, or if there's, a Dagger Mancer or something. It kind of has some questions, I think, for that. It's like, how do you minus the poison res of other things? You have Plague, but even then, Plague is in a sword or a Qatar, so you can't put that in all of the stuff. And, so it's like, okay, I guess you have a Rabies Druid, and you have to use Plague and a sword, and then you get the lower res plus the minus AME poison res. So now you're just kind of jamming poison facets everywhere, I guess. It does feel like this opens up some room for some new items, maybe some new uniques or something to come into the game. Where's that unique sacred armor? We don't have one, but maybe there could be one, and it has minus 15 enemy all res or minus poison, whatever, right? So there definitely could be some items and armors and weapons that can do a little bit more to just lower the res and bring it down off that 95. Because again, you don't need it to be minus 100, but you need it to not be 95, 90, 85% if you really want to do any decent damage to them. So, there is that question there. When you get to physical, I feel like it's really stretching because it's getting harder. I think for a physical character, all they're really going to do is maybe put it in their cube. And then if they come across like the Travancore members that have, physical immune or just a physical immune mob somewhere, they'll put it on and then just kill it really quickly and then take it off. Otherwise, having 10 to 20% physical DR, like additional damage, that's just so painful. That's just like too much, which is crazy. But like a Burroon gives you 8% DR. So this charm is worse than like, a Burroon's DR worth. And yeah, I think it'll be tough. I think it'll be tough to see a lot of the physical getting used, but I think some people will still find a use for it. And again, if you have like a 10% one and you're doing, trav runs and your character's pretty beefed up, then, you'll probably be okay. And now you don't have the annoying piece of the physical immune, wrecking you, unless of course you're a Berserk Barbarian, and then you're fine. And then, like I was saying before, the magic one is pretty much worthless because I don't think there's anything in the game that actually lowers magic resistance. Right? So it's 95% magic resistance, and that's it. Like, you can't lower it. So the mob just has 95% magic resistance. So the Hammerden will be able to drop the immunity of some of those guys, but then he's not going to do much damage at all to them. And I mean, I guess it just depends how souped up the Hammerden is if he can still kill some stuff. But he's only doing 1/20th of his damage. It'll take probably a while to kill any of the magic immune monsters, and probably just ends up not really being worth it. So I don't know what the solution is on that one. Maybe you just set it to like 80 or 75% so they still don't like murder them immediately, but they can at least like go through wave 2 at an okay speed. I don't know. That's a character and piece I haven't fully tested, but just some thoughts on that there. So yeah, that kind of is the character pieces overall, or the Sunder charms, the monsters, all of that. The last thing I would say is characters. I feel like a lot of characters are gaining value from the Sunder charms. I do think, of course, like Cold Source is a very solid one because you can be on super budget gear. But I do think it introduces at least some fun play and room for something like your Fire Druid now, for your Fire Sorceress, right? A lot of fire characters, I think, gain a little value. I think some poison characters can gain some value. Maybe even something like a Frostbow, Maiden or something, right? You just have like an Amazon and you're just running Ice Shot or whatever it's called. Like you're just doing these different builds. Freezing Arrow, that's what it's called. You're just doing these different like builds here, and I do think it does open them up to some fun. right? So you can kind of run around and enjoy it a little bit more. But, you know, I do think the top builds are still pretty top builds. And, you know, your S tier Hammerden still S tier, your S tier Lightning, you know, Source is still S tier, your S tier Blizz Source is still S tier. Like, I don't think any of those change. So I think a lot of stuff is still going to be pretty solid, and a lot of builds are still going to be decent here as well. Regardless, I'd love to hear your experience with all of this in the comments below. So feel free to post. Don't forget to like and subscribe, YouTube. Peace, everybody.